Well, the middle of November 23 now, and it's actually the middle of the morning too. As you can see, the sun hasn't really risen yet. The night is hanging in there, and it's properly cold too. I'm wearing my indoor hat and my body warmer, trying to save a bit of gas and keep myself comfortable. I haven't recorded much lately because there are so many horrible things going on in the world that I think my life didn't seem that important. But you got to plod on. So today I'm going to talk about 19. Well, it'll start in 1988, when I was about half the age I am now, and my son was born, and I became a parent. He was born in February. It wasn't a complete surprise, of course. I had had several months of anticipation, but nothing prepared me for the huge emotional tidal wave that came over me. Some fathers I know have really no connection with their children whatsoever. They might as well be sperm donors, and I suppose that's all they are. They probably didn't have a very strong connection with their own fathers. But I grew up in a conventional family, and I have a very strong bond with my brother and sister, and I loved both my parents, and they loved me. I didn't have any question about that, really. And I wanted to carry on that line and recreate that situation for myself. So it was a huge emotional wave that came over me when my son was born. It makes you question everything about yourself, like your own mortality, for example, and the huge responsibility that you bear for this person that you just recently met. And one of the things that I realized I had to change or I wanted to change, was the way that where I lived and the way that I lived, how I earned a living. I didn't know then that I was going to be a London taxi driver for the rest of my life, working life anyway. But I felt it was time for a change. It's very difficult to be a London taxi driver without living in or near London, and you can't just, it's not a transferable skill. You can't just go and do it somewhere else. I mean, it's, so I was thinking about how else can I earn a living. I wanted to move out of London as well. I thought, well, it'd be nice to go to a small town, somewhere like, I don't know, Cambridge was one of the places I'd quite like to have gone to. But anyway, what I needed was another job. And my options weren't that wide, really. I didn't have that many of them. But one of them I had, I had a history degree, and I knew that I could go on from there to do a so-called PGCE, postgraduate certificate in education. I wasn't going to be a historian or anything like that, but teaching did sort of appeal to me. I mean, after all, I'd just become a parent. I was inspired. So with all that in mind, I went ahead and applied to do a PGCE course, and I chose to go to apply to the Institute of Education, which is just off Russell Square in central London. And partly because it's a very prestigious school and I wanted to go there, but also I have to say primarily because it is in central London. There's a very good spot around the corner where I can park a taxi all day, and I could go there, study a bit during the day, go to work at night, earn a few quid, and keep things ticking over. In those days, I got a grant for going to college, the good old days, but it wasn't quite enough to live, especially with a young child. Anyway, I applied there, and after a while I got my rejection, so I didn't get a place. But I wasn't all that discouraged. I knew there was a lot of competition to go there, and I thought, well, I'll keep focus. I'll apply next year, and that's what I did. After a few weeks, months, whatever it was, I applied again, and all the time, of course, my son was growing up and becoming, instead of a baby, a toddler. And as any parent will know, toddlers are a little bit more demanding, or at least they have different demands from babies. I mean, babies, you can sort of put them down and they stay where you put them. Toddlers don't. You got to watch them all the time. Anyway. I applied again, and well, I got rejected again. Now, I was beginning to get a bit disappointed, of course, but what else could you do but go forward? I had to go forward and carry on, and well, I still wanted to make that change. So, in due course, I applied again. And as is often the case, the third time I was lucky. And eventually I got to go to college and start the course I had signed up for. But a huge change in the education was afoot. The government, under Margaret Thatcher, the Conservative government, had decided that what the nation needed was a national curriculum. They hadn't really got any idea about what that should be. They didn't consult with any teachers or educationalists or anything like that. But everybody in the Conservative Party seemed to think they had an idea. They all stuck their two penneth in and concocted a behemoth of ideas that wasn't workable and wasn't beneficial to anyone. They hoped that they could improve the education system not by spending any money on it, like decreasing the class sizes or maybe lightening the administrative burden on teachers or anything like that. I don't know. Their idea was to give teachers a good kick up the backside and make them work harder. That was the way. That was the way their forefathers had done it on their plantations and farms, no doubt. And so they thought that was the way to do it. And it was a cock-up, an unqualified Horlicks, let's say. And it caused consternation in staff rooms around the country, because teachers didn't know whether they had to throw out all the work that they accumulated over the years, all the learning they'd made, and start again from scratch and do it a whole new different way. Anyway, some of the ideas they had were bonkers and ended up in the dustbin. But while they were creating a sort of turmoil among teachers, of course, studying to be a teacher was a sort of roller coaster ride, because one week you were learning one thing, the next week it had been thrown out and something else had been put in its place, and you had to learn that. Anyway, the national curriculum was a nightmare, and there are some arguments for it, some against it. Personally, I think regional diversity is a much better plan, but there have to be some standards, some common ground between educational establishments, and some inspection, some maintenance of standards has to go on. But the national curriculum, rubbish. Anyway, it's particularly rubbish in relation to history, of course, which is my subject, because whereas in maths and physics, it's very difficult to sort of disagree with the facts. The facts are the facts, and that's that. But in history, well, one's interpretation of history is much more subjective than that. And of course, being the Conservative Party and the bunch of narrow-minded bigots that they are, they wanted to create a kind of national history curriculum which would somehow demonstrate the benefits of being British, would create a kind of cohesion, a single focus, so everybody was facing the same way and learning the same thing. And these people had confused the benefits of being rich and white and probably male with being British. I mean, being British was not an unalloyed benefit to everyone. Some people didn't like it at all. People like my grandfather's generation, who were gassed in the First World War, or the next generation who were shot out of the sky, they weren't so crazy about being British. It hadn't worked out so well for them. Of course, if you go into a classroom then, and now I expect, most of the children there are not the sons and daughters of middle-class white people. They're black or brown or Greek or Turkish or from somewhere else anyway. And if your ancestors were sold as slaves or indentured labour, or they had to give up their land because some white person told them it didn't belong to them anymore, they're not going to have quite the same outlook on Britishness, are they? And there is a part of history that you can teach which they would all find interesting and fascinating, the story of human development, if you like, and how their parents lived, how their grandparents lived, what actually happened. But to try and narrow it down to just the benefits of being British just won't wash. It's not it didn't benefit everyone. Anyway, eventually I did finish the course, and I got a certificate in secondary education, and it was made particularly hard by my father dying while I was at the end of the course, near the end of the course, and it frankly took the wind out of my sails. Birth is a life-changing experience, and so is death. But anyway, I finished the course so I could then become a teacher. and that's what I should talk about next time I make a video. I shall talk about my experience in the classroom. Anyway, I'll see you then.